So to keep this train on the track, moving forward, we're gonna do some brakes so we can stop, which is the opposite of moving forward. But we need to do it so we can move forward. It's confusing. Welcome to the shop. I'm Jared, and this is Wrench Every Day. Behind me is our 1971 International Harvester pickup truck that we are making into a muscle truck handling monster with Corvette suspension and LS Junkyard powertrain. We've renamed it from the Johnny Reb to the Johnny Rev with a V because that's what he's gonna do now. We've been fighting with and trying to sort out a way to fit our exhaust manifolds or headers into the truck. J&J Auto Wrecking was awesome and sent us out some GTO headers. When we found they weren't gonna work, they sent us some Corvette C5 headers because that is what our suspension base is. But because a Corvette uses a torque tube and rear transaxle, we weren't even gonna be able to modify them to fit. Plus they still didn't fit within the frame rails. So then we were gonna try the factory cast manifolds and they didn't fit. Then we moved on to some aftermarket tight fit cast manifolds and they still don't fit. So we've been kind of fighting that, and it was a topic of some discouragement. And then I realized we were sent these headers for free. So we're gonna start cutting these things up to try to turn them into what we need. The main issue on a normal car, you would have a steering shaft on the GTO. That's why these pipes come out. The steering shaft would have to fit through here. We need these to tuck in a lot closer. So we're just gonna cut that section of pipe off and see if we're able to get it inside the frame rail. Once it's inside the frame rail, we'll then come back and rebuild these with some pipe. On this side, it was a little bit closer to fitting, so we're going to then just cut this one runner off and we'd probably end up bringing it along here and dropping down. So we're gonna get those cut. That will hopefully work. Once we've gotten those in, we can get our trans mount, fill in our hole from a little extra clearancing we did in that last episode, but that should make life better. Get fuel done and get so much closer to starting this thing. None of it's gonna happen if I don't start cutting and getting to work, so that's what we're gonna do right now. Let's get those headers cut up and try to shove them in the frame. I'm trying to figure out the magic formula to this easy LS swap, and I think it's going back and not making it questionable. And what I mean by questionable, I mean shoving it deep down on Corvette suspension in between the frame rails. Because every time I think we've made headway on these manifolds and, you know, say, hey, we might be able to make this work, it's possible, we come over here and end up with basically impossible on this modifying. The two runners we had to cut to clear down below literally line up with the frame rail. There's not a way to make it work. So we're back to kind of working up a plan. If we did our custom headers, one, we can't get the proper size tubing quickly. We can do an entire one-off kit. We don't necessarily want to go that route because we're trying to keep this truck usable. We want it fast. We want to put the tow hitch, a better tow hitch setup on it, and regularly pull the fleet of Wrench Everyday cars around and take this down, drive it to Florida one time, go to the racetrack with it, you know, be silly with it, but its number one purpose is working. It's not just fun. We don't want it to turn into Earl with crazy side exit exhaust where it limits its ability to work. So what we've done is, I'm waiting for the text back right now from John, the J&J guys. We're gonna try factory C5 or C6 exhaust manifolds. They're not the best for extreme high horsepower, but we're not ever going to go for the extreme high horsepower. And what's different about the C5 and C6 manifolds is they drop down right in the center and swoop really cleanly there for us. So we should finally have manifolds that'll fit. But right now what we're going to do is take a quick trip over to Advance and pick up some brake tube and some brake fittings, and we're gonna start bending up some lines so we can get our nice big front disc brakes hooked back up and working. So to keep this train on the track, moving forward, we're gonna do some brakes so we can stop, which is the opposite of moving forward, but we need to do it so we can move forward. It's confusing.
Hey, Dwayne the editor here. I wanted to jump in and stop things and explain to you just for a second what Jared meant there. What he really meant to say was that when you stop, then you need to go forward, and I really have no idea what Jared meant there.
Let's go get some brake parts. Well, that was a small strikeout on the brake line parts. I wanted to get more of just the ends and raw tubing, and they had mostly just preformed hoses. And what I wanted to do for our brake lines is something a little bit cleaner. The other thing I've been doing is a lot of measuring and checking, and I think those Hooker cast manifolds might just make it in there. It's going to be very close, but every measurement, I got the tape measure out, that I can pull shows them working only just. And they support right around 500 wheel horsepower, which may seem like a disappointingly low number, but that's kind of our end goal with the truck. Again, a working truck can't have too much horsepower because you can generate a lot of heat, and it hurts the reliability of, say, a cross-country towing trip. So I'm looking at this and realize, had we done a traditional up on the frame mount, we'd have power steering hoses, but other than that, a relatively easy swap. But for some reason, somebody thought using the factory Corvette mounts and putting the engine on the ground was a good idea. I don't know who on earth thought that was a good idea, but he should probably be questioned thoroughly for making that choice. But we'll pick it up in the morning with a short time lapse driving down to McDonough for a big parts trip at Summit. So we got our parts loaded up. They're actually surprisingly busy. I guess with everyone staying home, they're building their project cars, which is actually kind of a cool thing to see. The one thing that was a little disappointing is the number of people who can't seem to follow small circles on the ground. We've got our manifolds. We're gonna get back up to Site B, get them unboxed, and go over and see, please, we finally found something that's gonna fit and work for us. So let's get driving. And we're back to Site B. That was a lot of driving today, a little bit of traffic, but we are here, and let's go over the goodies we bought. So excuse me the one-handed unboxing, the heavy box, and hopefully the box that means we're going to finally win are the Hooker cast headers. It's kind of hard to see through the glare, but these are designed to fit very tight to the engine, provide all the clearance that you need for starters and other vehicle accessories, and hopefully stay close to the frame rail. Also in here, we've got the ICT billet 0.68 inch injector spacers that are going to let us run our new truck injectors on the car manifold. We also picked up this new bulkhead wiring harness connector. It has what's called 22 circuits, meaning 22 wires can go through, and we had to remove the one from there, and we also have like the factory one here, which we may still continue to use this one and only replace that. I have roughly 24 total wires, but some of them are deleted with the new engine. So I'm gonna, again, go through, see what I have to keep, and if we can run it all on a single bulkhead connector there, we'll open up that hole, move these wires over, because a lot of those wires were gauge wires and startup wires, and I may end up going to like a real cool speed hut style, which will use our OBD2 wire. Brake ends, so that way we can build this new brake line that'll thread in there, go down to the T, and then we've got in it somewhere else the GM Corvette ends. We have a nice coil, a brake line. Unfortunately, I don't have a straightener anymore. I need to order a new one, and Summit didn't have one in stock. But the first things first, please let those fit. Well, we got good news and not good news, but we'll figure it out. So our driver's side is coming in and looking great. We've got the clearance we need. It's tucked nice and good. Looks pretty. And then, if you saw from trying to fit, we're not so lucky on this side. Because of that little starter kick out, we are hitting the frame. And we're not quite at the angle we need. So there's some possibility of cutting down that flange so it'll come out and clock a little bit more. Or we may end up notching the frame a small amount. Or we flip both of them upside down. But the problem with doing that is because I have car accessories, that gets in the way of something very badly. So I could flip this one upside down, run a pipe underneath and up, and they will join around there, but that is not what we want to do. It's not the plan for the build, but seems like fate is shoving us very, very, very hard in that direction. I'm gonna think about it.
Everyone remain very, very still. Jared is thinking.
You guys ready for some good news? Because I was ready for some good news. Got the grinders and saws out, and it fits. We had to cut a nice big hole. When we take the engine back out for kind of the final cleanup and paint, I'll be able to plate that in. And again, I'm not too worried notching and re-welding this frame because it is so thin that we're actually able to add a lot of strength by plating in the frames, similar to what we did here for the steering shaft. So it's one of those things that's not ideal. Modern high-strength steel and tempered steels, you can't do this with. But since this is 71, where crash safety wasn't even on the page, that's not a problem. So we've got exhaust manifolds, which again, I know some people are thinking turbo. With as much room as we have on top of the engine, there's something else that fits a lot better there. So let's try to build some brakes real quick so we can stop the front end. Now that we've got the right stuff to do it, get that taken care of and just kind of keep punching out our long list of little things so we can get this thing fired up and running. As you can tell by Pyrrha, it's a little warm today, so she's sitting right in front of the blower fan that's also meant to cool my other help, but she's hogging it all herself. And she looks magnificent. If only we all had that kind of fur to blow in the wind. What we did off camera real quick is we got the right T-fitting here for our brake lines, connected everything, and did just a real quick rough bleed. One, to make sure we're not blowing out brake fluid of all of our newly made fittings, and two, make sure the brakes kind of work. And obviously rolling a foot, we can't get much speed, but you can see that it's starting to scrub off the rust a little bit. So that means we are indeed working. All right, let's bring you up close. So these are our solid aluminum end tanks that actually will hold the coolant. And what we're going to be able to do is weld a small L bracket or piece of angle that will then be able to bolt into these factory mounting bolts right there and space it out ever so slightly. We are going to have to relocate the really cool old international coolant tank, so we'll have a real nice big beefy easy to get radiator to handle all of that Junkyard LS power. So let's see if I can track down the L bracket that I had, and then we will get it cut to length, and then we're going to have to take a field trip to a TIG welder so I can get that welded in. My finest work, but we have our mounts now attached to the end tanks of the radiator. Got that side as well. We're gonna let this cool off before unclamping it. Aluminum really likes to warp when you put that much heat into it, so you keep it on a solid flat surface while it cools down, and it tends not to warp as badly. So as soon as that cools down, we get to run back over to Site B. Kind of cool looking through and just seeing the pretty aluminum, since you definitely won't ever see the engine down there. As we are bolting this in, I actually have neoprene washers. You never want to bolt the aluminum radiator directly to steel. You get some dissimilar metal corrosion. You can end up with some current flow through the radiator, get some electrolysis that way. There's lots of weird things that can happen, so you always want a little bit of insulation barrier from your radiator to the steel. Also, I don't think we're going to have coolant burping problems. Generally, you need your fill port to be the highest part of your cooling system. I don't think that's a problem. The fact that our lower radiator hose is almost taller than our upper hose, it's going to be interesting. So now we've got that taken care of, we're starting to lay out our power wiring and our fuse box location. Trying to decide if I want it here or a little bit lower. The other thing I've got coming, because I couldn't find it at the local stores, are what's called a power distribution stud. It's I actually have a bus bar coming that I'll mount here, where I'll be able to, from the battery, run one large 4-gauge wire and distribute all my power feeds independently into the fuse box, so we have nice clean wire. And I also have a ground bus bar, which is basically the same thing. We'll run the same heavy gauge wire over, so everything on this side will have a nice, clean, good, crisp ground. One thing you may ask is, why don't we just use the alternator stud and run power? Modern computers are very finicky on the quality of their voltage as it comes in, and the alternator generates not a constant smooth voltage. As the stator is spinning inside the windings and actually generating the electricity, there's breaks in it. So you have points of voltage up and then no voltage, voltage up, then no voltage. And the battery itself kind of acts as the capacitor of the entire system. It's able to absorb those pulses and waves coming into it, and by connecting directly to the battery, you get a nice, smooth, consistent current, which the electronics are happy with. So we'll actually have our own separate alternator wire. Along right next to it is going to be our power feed wire, because again, we don't want those surges of electricity going through our system. So that's one thing to think of when you are putting something together. Yes, you can use the alternator stud as your power supply. It's done a lot, but if you're going to get into the nuances of right and perfect and best optimum voltage signals, you want to pull it from the battery directly, so you have a nice, smooth current and level voltage supply. We've been putting together the fuse box assembly for all of the wiring we've added in. I've got just kind of a temporary label made up there for what each thing, for what it does. We have to set up our power bus and ground bus on this side that will connect over to the battery shortly. We've been working on our new bulkhead connector, getting all of our wiring set up, and we just got our pass-through put together there. They said make a 2-inch hole. I'm thinking we needed an 1 7/8 hole, but we'll still be able to completely seal that surface once it's tightened down. We won't have any water leaks. This is for the headlights and turn signals. This will be for our start signal, our ignition switch, all of the other important wiring that we need to make the truck start up. So a few more things to go on that. We've also got our harness just quickly thrown together for the OBD2. This is where our scan tool will plug in, since again, by going to the modern computers, we're gonna have all of that monitored communication. This is also how we're gonna get to tune it. I just got word that the package, including the very important part, came in today. We have something really fun and exciting to announce to go along with that once I pick that up, we'll be able to talk about that tomorrow. A little bit more wiring to go on the inside and the outside. Dwayne, the editor, didn't like how dark things were, so he got me that cool little spotlight. So hopefully that'll help out a little bit. On the engine, we've got our intake bolted on, and we've got our power wire to run down to the fuel pump that will work for now, because we're trying to get this fired up before I've got to go back down and film with Tavarish, because we've got a couple wrench projects and some Tavarish projects to work on. We'll keep plugging away. We'll set up, do a little bit more wiring, pick up that real cool, exciting product from the house for tomorrow. And again, just keep on, keep on, keep on. Let's get caught up to speed, because there's been a lot that's been happening. I'm assuming in the time lapses Dwayne has already shown you. Part of the reason we had to do a lot of time lapses is Site B is a shared space with a couple other friends. They were here working, and I can't quite yell and talk too much when they're hanging out in the background. Plus they make a lot of noise. So let's go over everything. Starter feed, probably well overkill. I prefer overkill than not enough. These are our power supply and alternator feed wires coming over to our fuse box. These are those marine grade distribution blocks. These are still our 2 control wires for the electric fans. Electric fans aren't installed yet, and they're gonna go to some what's called pulse width modulation solid state relays. We'll get to show those off when it's their turn. Fuse boxes together. ECU is sitting where it's gonna live. It's not mounted. We have our drive-by-wire ECU mounted. Bulkhead connectors finished. We have new spark plugs in. We have coil packs mounted. I'm gonna end up having to remote mount them, which we were thinking was gonna happen, but we definitely need to now. The other cool thing we have now is the fuel lines plumbed. Doesn't look like anything's really changed. I used my existing fuel injection lines from the throttle body fuel injection, adapted it to the LS style fuel filter. The LS is returnless on the fuel rail, but it actually has its pressure regulators built into that quick release setup on the fuel filter. We have the harness fully plugged in. I didn't have enough clamps to actually work on building the intake out, so we just have the elbow with the mass airflow meter mounted. It's not ideal that way, but it'll work. We've gone over earlier, our brake lines are built so we can actually stop the truck. Lots and lots of little things. And we're down to 3 wires to hook up inside, and then we can turn a key switch and start this. Except we have to do one more thing before it can start, and that's gonna have to wait to next episode.
What?
I know it's kind of a tease to be like, wait one more episode for the first start, but it's because of you guys. We recently hit 200,000 subscribers, which is actually a huge deal, and thanks solely because of you guys. So we are partnering with someone to do a really cool, exciting giveaway, and I get to use that product in the next episode to do the final adjustments to get us ready for the first start. Best part of the giveaway, you just have to follow us on Instagram and follow the guys who are giving us the product on Instagram. But we're gonna cover that in a little more details at the beginning of the next episode. So make sure you join us. Subscribe if you haven't. We've got a lot of you guys are already subscribed. I appreciate it. This is the first time we're asking you to subscribe. It always helps us out to keep growing the channel, keep doing stupid things like putting LS and Corvette suspension deep into the bowels of a old international pickup truck, which no one should really do, but we're doing it. So that's wrapping us up completely. I'm Jared. This has been Wrench Every Day, reminding you to always make questionable choices and make sure to drink enough water when it's hot out.